My name is Jenna Carter, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to Daniel for 3 years. While our marriage had its ups and downs, it was mostly peaceful until his mother, Camilla Carter, became a regular presence in our lives. Camilla had a way of making herself the center of attention, often at my expense, and her latest stunt was the most damaging yet. It all started on a chilly New Year's Eve. Daniel had suggested hosting a party at our house, and while I wasn't thrilled with the idea, I agreed. I spent the entire day preparing, decorating the living room, preparing snacks, and ensuring everything was perfect. I wanted the evening to be memorable for the right reasons. When Camilla arrived, she brought a group of her friends, all dressed to impress and radiating an air of superiority. As she swept into the house, she barely acknowledged me, her sharp eyes scanning the decorations with a critical gaze. "Oh, Jenna, you've really outdone yourself this time," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's quaint." I forced a smile, determined not to let her ruin the evening. But as the night went on, her comments grew bolder. She began to criticize everything, the food, the music, and even my outfit. Each jab felt like a needle, but I bit my tongue and kept smiling. What I didn't realize was that Camilla had a plan. She wasn't just insulting me for fun. She was planting seeds of doubt in the minds of her friends. Between glasses of wine and bursts of laughter, I overheard snippets of her conversations. "She's not exactly what I pictured for Daniel," she said to one of her friends, casting a sideways glance at me. "She doesn't have the grace or poise to represent our family." Her friends nodded sympathetically, their eyes following me as I worked to keep the party running smoothly. By the time the clock struck midnight, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The laughter and whispers seemed louder, and Camilla's presence loomed over me like a storm cloud. I realized this wasn't just another New Year's Eve, it was an ambush. As the evening progressed, Camilla's plan became clearer. She wasn't just mocking me, she was actively turning her friends against me. Each conversation seemed carefully designed to paint me as an unworthy wife for Daniel and an outsider in their family. Her friends were more than willing participants, laughing at her remarks and adding their own subtle jabs. At one point, I overheard Camilla whispering to one of her closest friends, Hannah, near the dining table. "Daniel's always been too soft-hearted," she said. "He lets her run the house, but she has no idea how to handle responsibility. She's just ordinary." Hannah tilted her head sympathetically. "Poor Daniel," she said, glancing at me as if I weren't standing just a few feet away. "He deserves someone who can match his potential." I clenched my fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms as I fought the urge to respond. Camilla's words weren't just cruel, they were calculated. She was weaving a narrative, and I was the villain. The tipping point came when Camilla gathered her friends in the living room for what seemed like a casual toast. "Ladies," she began, raising her glass high, "here's to another year of prosperity, family, and resilience." Her eyes landed on me, and a sly smile crept onto her face. Because let's face it, not everyone is cut out for the pressures of family life. The room erupted in laughter. Daniel stood at the edge of the group, his face pale but expressionless. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. I felt my chest tighten as a wave of anger and humiliation swept over me. Camilla wasn't finished. "Sometimes," she continued, "you have to question whether certain people truly belong. Like weeds in a garden, you have to pluck them out before they ruin everything." Her friends clinked their glasses, their laughter ringing in my ears. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about my dignity, my marriage, and my future. I realized then that Camilla wasn't going to stop until she had turned everyone, including Daniel, against me. I excused myself quietly and went upstairs, the weight of the evening pressing down on me. Staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Camilla or her manipulative games control my life any longer. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted upstairs as I stood in the bathroom, gripping the sink. My reflection stared back at me, tired but resolute. This wasn't the life I had envisioned when I married Daniel. I had tried to make peace, to earn his mother's respect, But no amount of effort could satisfy Camilla. That night, I decided I was done being her target. The next morning, the house was quiet except for the faint sound of Daniel snoring. The living room bore the remnants of the party: empty wine glasses, scattered confetti, and crumpled napkins. It was as if the chaos of last night still lingered in the air, mocking me. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the dining table, replaying Camilla's words in my mind. Each comment, each laugh, felt like another weight added to my shoulders. But for the first time, instead of feeling crushed, I felt a spark of defiance. Enough was enough. I reached for my phone and opened the blank note. It was time to create a plan, not just to defend myself, but to take back control of my life. My fingers hovered over the screen as I began listing what needed to be done. First, I had to address the root of the problem: Camilla's influence over my life and my marriage. By the time Daniel woke up and stumbled into the kitchen, I was ready. Daniel rubbed his eyes and looked at me, clearly sensing my tension. "Morning," he muttered, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Rough night." "Rough doesn't even begin to describe it," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He glanced at me but didn't say anything, his silence speaking volumes. I decided to confront him directly. "Do you even realize what happened last night?" I asked, setting my mug down with a sharp clink. "Your mother humiliated me in front of her friends again, and you didn't say a word. Not one word." Daniel sighed and leaned against the counter. "You know how she is, Jenna. She doesn't mean half the things she says." "That's not an excuse," I snapped. "She's tearing me down in my own home, and you're letting her." "I can't keep living like this, Daniel. Something has to change." He hesitated but, instead of responding, picked up his phone and walked out of the kitchen. His indifference stung, but it also solidified my resolve. If he wouldn't stand up for me, I would stand up for myself. Daniel's indifference as he walked out of the kitchen didn't just sting, it set something off inside me. I had spent years bending over backward for his approval and his mother's acceptance, and this was the result: a life where I was barely more than a shadow in my own home. That was about to change. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. The first step in my plan was simple: I needed advice from someone who understood how to deal with difficult family dynamics. I scrolled through my contacts and dialed my best friend, Emily Miller, someone who had always been brutally honest with me. "Jenna? It's early. Everything okay?" Emily's voice was groggy but concerned. "No, it's not," I admitted. I quickly recounted the events of the previous night, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and frustration. When I finished, there was a long pause on her end. "Jenna," she said finally, her tone firm, "you can't keep letting Camilla treat you like this. She's not just toxic, she's manipulative. And Daniel? He's enabling her." "I know," I said, biting my lip. "But what do I do? She's like a storm that just keeps coming back, no matter how much I try to reason with her." "You stop reasoning," Emily said bluntly. "You set boundaries, and you stick to them. She wants control, and the only way to take that away is to take a stand. This is your house, your life. Act like it." Her words hit me like a jolt of energy. She was right. Camilla's power came from the fact that I had always allowed her to dictate the narrative. It was time to rewrite it. After hanging up, I felt a surge of determination. The first boundary I needed to set was clear: Camilla wasn't going to use my home as her battleground anymore. That meant taking charge of what happened under my roof, starting with the gatherings she so frequently dominated. Later that afternoon, I sat Daniel down in the living room. He was scrolling through his phone, still acting as though nothing had happened. I didn't wait for him to start the conversation. "We need to talk," I said firmly. He looked up, startled by the determination in my voice. "What now?" he asked, a hint of annoyance creeping in. "This is my house," I began. "I've tolerated your mother's behavior for far too long, but that stops now. She doesn't get to come here and humiliate me. If she can't respect me in my own home, then she's not welcome here." Daniel blinked at me, clearly caught off guard. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being honest," I said. "This is my boundary, Daniel. If you can't support it, then we have bigger problems than your mother." His silence was deafening, but for the first time, I didn't feel defeated. I had drawn my line, and whether he liked it or not, I wasn't stepping back. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. Daniel avoided me, clearly unhappy with the boundaries I had set, but I stood firm. I knew the moment would come when Camilla would test those boundaries, and it came sooner than I expected. Camilla called Daniel the following weekend, inviting herself over under the pretense of dropping off some family heirlooms. I overheard Daniel on the phone, giving her the green light without consulting me. When he hung up, I walked into the room, my arms crossed. "She's coming here?" I asked, my tone sharp. "It's just a quick visit," Daniel said defensively. "She's bringing some things she wants me to have." "She doesn't respect me, Daniel," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "I told you, if she can't treat me with dignity, she's not welcome here." Daniel shrugged, as if to say, "What can I do?" I knew then that if he wasn't going to stand up to her, I would have to handle this myself. That Saturday, Camilla arrived in her usual fashion, loud, critical, and completely self-assured. She swept through the front door without knocking, her arms full of boxes, and immediately started barking orders about where they should go. Daniel trailed behind her, looking sheepish. "Jenna," Camilla said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought I'd bring some family treasures to make this house feel more like a proper Carter home." I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Camilla, I appreciate the gesture, but we need to talk." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she plastered on a smile. "Talk about what, dear?" "About boundaries," I said, standing tall. "This is my home, and I've decided I won't tolerate being disrespected here anymore." Camilla let out a laugh, loud and dismissive. "Disrespected? Jenna, darling, you take things so personally. I'm just trying to help you rise to the standards this family deserves. Mocking me in front of your friends isn't helping," I said firmly. "Criticizing everything I do isn't helping. And using my home to humiliate me? That stops today." The room fell silent. I said firmly, "Criticizing everything I do isn't helping, and using my home to humiliate me? That stops today." The room fell silent. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "No, Daniel, this isn't a debate. I've tolerated this long enough. If Camilla can't respect me, she doesn't need to visit." Camilla's smile faltered, and her tone turned icy. "Are you telling me I'm not welcome in my son's house?" "I'm telling you that if you can't treat me with respect, you're not welcome in my home," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. For the first time, Camilla seemed at a loss for words. She turned to Daniel, expecting him to defend her, but he said nothing. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she set the boxes down and stormed out of the house without another word. I felt a wave of relief as the door slammed shut. For the first time in years, I had stood up to Camilla, and she hadn't won. But I thought that standing up to Camilla would end her manipulative behavior. I underestimated her ability to retaliate. A few days after her dramatic exit, she launched her next attack, not through words, but by mobilizing her friends. It began with a series of social media posts. Camilla, ever the dramatist, wrote about how she had been barred from her son's home by a vindictive and insecure daughter-in-law. Her friends chimed in with sympathy, calling me controlling and ungrateful. The comments were harsh, and while I tried to ignore them, the weight of their judgment lingered. Then came the phone calls. Mutual acquaintances, neighbors, and even distant relatives started calling Daniel to ask what had happened. Some took Camilla's side outright, while others simply wanted to stir the pot. Daniel, caught in the crossfire, grew increasingly irritated. "This is getting out of hand, Jenna," he said one evening, pacing the living room. "You need to fix this." I looked up from my laptop, incredulous. "I need to fix this? Camilla is the one spreading lies about me. She's the one turning people against me." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "She's my mother. What do you want me to do? Cut her out of my life?" "I want you to stand up for me," I said, my voice firm but calm. "For once, Daniel, tell her this isn't okay. Tell her she can't treat me like this." He hesitated, and I saw the familiar flicker of indecision in his eyes. It was the same hesitation that had allowed Camilla to control him for so long. I realized then that expecting him to change might be futile. That weekend, Camilla escalated her campaign. She invited her friends to lunch and used the opportunity to spread more rumors about me. One of her friends, Amanda, even had the audacity to call me directly. "You know, Jenna," Amanda began, her tone smug, "Camilla has done so much for you. She only wants what's best for her family. Maybe you should consider being a bit more accommodating." I gripped the phone tightly, my anger simmering. "Amanda, with all due respect, you don't know the full story, and frankly, it's none of your business." "Oh, but it is," Amanda replied. "Camilla is a dear friend, and it's upsetting to see her so hurt." I hung up without responding, my hands shaking. Camilla had turned this into a public spectacle, and I knew I couldn't let it continue. That night, I began gathering evidence. I printed screenshots of her social media posts, documented the harassing calls, and saved every voicemail from her friends. If Camilla wanted to turn this into a battle, I was ready to fight back, not with her manipulative tactics, but with the truth. Camilla's attempts to tarnish my reputation had gone too far, and I wasn't going to let her continue unchecked. With the evidence I had gathered, social media posts, voicemails, and even a few texts from her friends, I knew I had enough to take action. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer, Sarah Reed, who specialized in harassment and defamation cases. Sarah listened patiently as I recounted everything Camilla had done over the past few years, from her public insults to her most recent smear campaign. "This is a classic case of defamation and harassment," Sarah said, her tone professional but reassuring. "We can file a cease and desist order to stop her from continuing this behavior. If she doesn't comply, we can pursue further legal action." Hearing those words lifted a weight off my shoulders. For the first time, I felt like I had some control over the situation. I left Sarah's office with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to see this through. That evening, I sat Daniel down once again. He had been avoiding the topic ever since Camilla's behavior escalated, but this time, I refused to let him sidestep it. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said, watching his reaction closely. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked genuinely alarmed. "A lawyer? Jenna, are you serious?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief and frustration. "Completely serious," I replied firmly. "Your mother has crossed every line imaginable, and I'm not going to stand by while she spreads lies about me and turns people against me. This stops now." He shook his head, leaning back on the couch. "This is just going to make things worse." "No, Daniel," I said, my voice steady. "What's making things worse is your refusal to stand up to her. If you won't, I will." For the first time, Daniel didn't argue. He looked down, his silence speaking volumes. I knew he wasn't ready to take my side fully, but I didn't need his permission to defend myself anymore. The next day, Sarah sent the cease and desist letter to Camilla, outlining her behavior and the legal consequences if she didn't stop. I half expected Camilla to ignore it, but to my surprise, she responded immediately by calling Daniel. Her voice echoed through the phone as Daniel put her on speaker, her words dripping with anger and disbelief. "She's suing me? Me? After everything I've done for her," she shrieked. "No, Camilla," I interjected calmly. "I'm not suing you yet. I'm simply asking you to stop harassing me. If you comply, this ends here." Her silence on the other end was telling. For the first time, Camilla had nothing to say. Later that week, I received a message from Sarah. Camilla had agreed to comply with the cease and desist order. While it didn't erase the damage she had done, it was a step in the right direction. Camilla's compliance with the cease and desist order was short-lived. While her public smearing had stopped, her bitterness found a new outlet. A week after receiving the letter, she decided to make her retaliation more personal. One afternoon, as I returned from running errands, I noticed a familiar car parked outside my house, Camilla's. My stomach churned as I approached the front door. I opened it to find her sitting in the living room, her arms crossed, and an indignant look on her face. "How did you get in?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Daniel let me in," she replied coolly, glancing toward my husband, who stood by the kitchen doorway looking uncomfortable. We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss, I said, setting my bag down. You've already been warned to stay out of my life. Camilla stood, her presence towering in the room despite her smaller stature. You're tearing this family apart, Jenna. Your selfishness is ruining Daniel's life, and I won't stand for it. Her words were like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Camilla, this isn't about family or selfishness. This is about you crossing boundaries and refusing to respect me or my marriage, she scoffed. Respect you? You've done nothing to earn it. I don't need to earn it, I shot back, my voice firm. Respect isn't something you give based on who you like. It's basic decency, something you seem to lack. Camilla's face turned red with anger. I've had enough of this, she spat. You think you can just push me out of Daniel's life? I've been here long before you, and I'll be here long after. I took a deep breath, refusing to let her words rattle me. You're welcome to be in Daniel's life, Camilla, I said, but if you want to be part of mine, you'll have to change the way you treat me. Camilla glared at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to Daniel, expecting him to intervene. Daniel, are you really going to let her talk to me like this? To my surprise, Daniel hesitated. Mom, maybe you should go, he said softly. This is getting out of hand. Camilla stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and hurt. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the house. Her departure brought a heavy silence. Daniel looked at me, guilt etched across his face. I should have done more, he admitted quietly. You still can, I replied. But you need to decide whose side you're on. For the first time, it seemed like Daniel understood the gravity of the situation. I thought Camilla storming out would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Her anger only seemed to fuel her desperation. A few days later, I received a call from my lawyer, Sarah. Jenna, she began, her tone serious. I just got off the phone with the new buyers of your mother-in-law's house. It seems Camilla tried to file a claim on the property, insisting she still owns it. She even presented forged documents. I froze. Forged documents? That's absurd. She has no claim to that house. It's legally mine and was sold fair and square. Exactly, Sarah replied. The buyers are furious and have filed a formal complaint against her for fraud. This isn't just about harassment anymore. Camilla could face serious legal consequences. That evening, I sat Daniel down again. Your mother's taken this too far, I said, showing him the email Sarah had sent outlining Camilla's actions. She forged documents to claim the house we sold. This isn't just personal anymore, it's criminal. Daniel stared at the screen, his face pale. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, I replied firmly. But you need to decide if you're going to continue enabling her or let her face the consequences of her actions. For the first time, Daniel seemed genuinely conflicted. She's my mom, he whispered. But what she's done, it's not okay. A week later, Camilla was summoned to court. Sarah represented me, while Camilla arrived with a lawyer of her own. Though it was clear her case was weak, the evidence against her was overwhelming. The forged documents, the attempts to manipulate the buyers, and her blatant disregard for the cease and desist order. During the hearing, Camilla tried to defend herself. I was only trying to protect what's rightfully my family's, she said, her voice trembling. This house has always been part of the Carter legacy. Sarah countered sharply. The house was legally sold by Jenna Carter, its rightful owner. Your actions, filing false claims and presenting forged documents, are not only unethical but illegal. The judge wasn't swayed by Camilla's theatrics. By the end of the hearing, she was found guilty of fraud and ordered to pay significant damages to the buyers. Additionally, she faced community service and a formal warning for attempting to manipulate legal documents. After the hearing, Daniel and I sat together in silence. He finally broke it. I've been blind to how toxic this has been, he admitted. You didn't deserve any of this, Jenna. I didn't, I agreed. But now you see it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He nodded slowly. I'm going to set boundaries with her, and I'll stand by you this time. With Camilla's influence finally waning, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. Daniel began attending therapy to work through his issues with his mother, and for the first time, we started rebuilding our relationship on equal footing. As for Camilla, she stayed away, legally bound to keep her distance and too humiliated to push further. I focused on myself, pouring my energy into the hobbies and goals I had neglected for so long. Sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I finally felt at peace. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my home, not just from Camilla, but from the years of emotional weight she had burdened me with.